last and certainly least, we now have two of John's very posh friends from Norwich School. Two stools.
Haven't got the same ball pack.
We hadn't even planned that. Wasn't that posh, not what we were there. Anyway, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm afraid we've got things written down here. And I need these. Now, I'm sure that a lot of you are quite concerned.
What?
I'm sure that a lot of you are quite concerned that as John has three best men today, the speeches could go on a bit.
Yes.
Best men or best men?
Best men. Rest assured though, having recently been to a wedding where people around me were starting to self-harm when the best man's speech passed the 40-minute mark, I'm determined to keep it short. Okay? Not only that, a short speech is much easier to write. Can you hear me at the back? No! Excellent. In the interest of protocol, it's at this point I would like to thank John and Kitty and Hannah for their little speeches there, and obviously Kitty and Helen, because if it wasn't for them we wouldn't all be here today anyway. I would also like to thank Xenia and John for the invite, which when opened scattered hundreds of irritating tiny sparkly hearts all over the kitchen floor. We're still finding them now several months later. Don't worry though, we've collected them all up. We'll be returning them in due course so you can see how you like it. During the research for this speech, I did look into the three key elements of a wedding day. First, the aisle. Okay, possibly the longest walk a man will ever take. Second, the altar, the place where two become one. And third, the hymns to celebrate the marriage. Now this probably explains why I heard Xenia muttering, "I'll alter him, I'll alter him." I'd just like to thank the internet for that one. It came under the heading Icebreakers. Anyway, enough of that formalities, now on with the character assassination. Just to introduce yourselves, I'm Chris Ball, this is my brother Richard, and we've been good friends of John's for 40 long years. Having met at the age of 11. You don't look that old, I heard. I thought. Oh no, we didn't.
Add them together and work out the age.
Some background. For those of you who don't know, John was born in British Guiana in 1958. At the age of 10 months, he moved to Kingston, Jamaica. And after 4 years there, the family moved to Cricklewood. That's London, not Wyndham. For local people, there's a... Yeah, all right. Okay. For a short spell before moving to Norfolk and settling in Old Catton in 1964, and that was when we met him. I understand that at the time he was a sweet little boy who used to get bullied by his big sister. I have this information on good authority from his big sister, who also informed me that even at that tender age in Jamaica, he often spent the night on the tiles. He did. Quite literally, in fact, as for some reason, possibly because he was hot, he used to get out of bed in the middle of the night and go and sleep on the cool tiles in the passage outside his room. Unfortunately, it was the passage that led to the toilet. And unsuspecting late-night, bleary-eyed visitors to the smallest room regularly came a cropper when they tripped over his prone form on the ground. Anyway, as I'm sure most of you know, John is partial to the odd pint or two now and again. Yeah. And this early training stood him in good stead for many more nights on the tiles. In the ensuing years, and ensured the livelihood of many a publican across the land. Now, before we go any further, John, could you just come down here? Could you just give us a twirl? Can we all see a bit, baby, as well? Yeah, give us a twirl. When we first met at school, John was a mere shadow of the figure you see here before you today. It's hard to imagine, but he was so thin he had to walk about in the shower to get wet and use dental floss as toilet paper. Is that Everyone all right? Everyone at school had a nickname, and initially John was called Lucky, as in Lucky his legs don't break, or Wednesday, as in Wednesday gonna break. Okay. We then settled on Brime in honour of the famous matchsticks. Eventually, though, he became known, and we've always known him really, as Stiff. Okay. So I'd just like to point out this is actually nothing to do with him being dead, which he clearly wasn't, or with having a bad back. You may speculate about other reasons for this particular sobriquet. Indeed, I believe Xenia's eyes lit up when she first heard it. but keep it clean. But it was simply as a result of playing the old schoolboy game of reversing the letters in a person's surname. And Griffiths therefore became Stiffierg. Have a go at it, Stiffierg. You can try and work it out later. Or Stiff for short. So when he actually introduced himself to us the first time, he said, "Hi, I'm Stiff." But we were only 11 and we went, "Strange name." So, anyway. Where are we? But anyway, I'm sure you've all, since you've all known him, he's been a John to you. But I can assure you he's always been a Stiff to me. I was going to mention his second name as well, but judging by the amount of shoulders that were shaking uncontrollably up and down once it became apparent during the service that it was Cyril, I can see no point in going any further with that one. Well, it caused a lot of hilarity at school anyway. Anyway, looking back, Stiff didn't have a lot going for him in those days. He had a dodgy nickname, he was freckled and skinny. And Chris and I took pity on him and befriended him, although we weren't freckled, but we did have matching legs. So we made a good team. And John has remained a great friend ever since. Well, up until now. We spent a great deal of time together, both during term time and during the holidays. And it was during this time that John regularly cycled from his home in Old Catton out to Poringland, where we lived. It was about 8 miles each way, so this was no mean feat for a person whose legs resembled bits of cotton with knots tied in them. Not only that, he did it on a Rally Moulton. Anyone remember that? Vehicle that was more akin to a child's scooter than a bicycle. So you can imagine the effort required. Anyway, we worked out it was much better for John to cycle to us than for us to cycle to John, as seeing as there were 2 of us, it would have been 16 miles each way.
Did you fall for it?
Every time.
What school was that? It's a much better school now.
You are accounting.
John has always been wise beyond his years. Although you wouldn't think so to look at him. At school, when the rest of his kids were listening to Led Zeppelin and Pink Floyd, he was just moving on from Glenn Miller and Al Bowley to Bob Dylan, of whom he's still an enormous fan, almost a groupie actually, but maybe more mention that later, and the Beach Boys and Flanders and Swan. I remember John introducing the delights of Flanders and Swan. Look, you're an 8-year-old over there. 10.
I'm 10!
10, sorry. That's it. Not the favourite uncle anymore. Not that bad, is it? Anyway, he was even an uncle at 12 when his big sister suddenly got even bigger. Roz was only 4 years older, so this came as something of a surprise to us 12-year-olds, although I suspect not quite so much a surprise as it was to brother-in-law Les. Anyway, being an uncle was something I didn't achieve until I was 40, so it took me a while to catch up there. Richard and I left the school after 3 years, and fortunately didn't bump into him again for another 10. Also, until he moved back to Norwich, having gone to university in Salford after finishing 6th form. Richard managed to get him a job at Air UK where he was working, and it was there that he put his university education to good use, stuffing envelopes with timetables and putting them in the letterbox. However, he did decide this wasn't really the best use of said university education, so he found himself another job, working behind the counter in a record store. It was here that his keen interest in music developed further, and his knowledge of music, old and new, saw him headhunted by the manager of HMV in Plymouth. This sounds grand, but the bloke who did the headhunting happened to be his best mate from the record store in Norwich.
So make my own minds up on that one. Anyway, I'm not entirely sure how long he stayed in Plymouth, but he decided there was no future in what he was doing, so he changed career and moved back up to Manchester. Again. To work in sales for Tandy, Thorny EMI, Computerland and other IT-based companies. Is that right? And he's remained in that industry ever since.
Well, something else about Stiff, he's a keen quizzer. In fact, hardly surprising since at school he was a right flipping know-it-all. Instead of reading adult magazines like any normal schoolboy, he was up to his hypothalamus in Reader's Digest, dictionaries and encyclopedia, plus the odd copy of National Geographic, where he displayed an interest in the study of African tribeswomen. Anyway, whenever it was being discussed, he would invariably and annoyingly interject with a "Did you know that?" And even more annoyingly, he would even do it when you weren't discussing anything at all. And no matter what you knew about something, he always knew something more, whether it be about the internal combustion engine, volcanoes, animal husbandry, something even more prosaic than that, I don't know. However, he does know everything, and in spite of our expectations, we're still waiting for him to discover the 27th letter of the alphabet. What are you coming up with that one, John? Anyway, we digress. As I said, he's a keen quizzer. But perhaps not just to show off his 360-degree knowledge, but more because quizzes are generally held in pubs. And his encyclopedic knowledge now stretches to all the ins and outs of the brewing industry and real ale. So he can tell you all about hops and finings and whatever you need to know. Anyway, John joined me recently for a quiz at a local pub a couple of weeks ago. I'd pulled him in as a ringer in the hope of trouncing the team that regularly wins. Anyway, out of 18 teams, we came second from last. Normally, when I'm with my other friends, we come second. But to be fair, he normally does very well. But anyway, yeah, we came second from last. Anyway, by the way, John, Scary Spice is not a type of very hot chili. Poll tax is not something you pay at a lap dancing club. And the Colossus of Rhodes is not the M25. Okay. Those of you who know you have 7 Wonders of the World, you might get that. Anyway, usually my response to John's "Did you know that?" comments would be, "And did you know that nobody loves a smart?" Well, I was wrong, because apparently they do. Anyway, over the course of the years, we've been on several holidays with John, and the most recent one was a couple of years ago when he, myself and Steve, over there, the bald chap, yes, went to Ibiza for a week. Not a lot of sleeping went on, actually, but not due to being out all night clubbing, I'm afraid. To be accurate, not a lot of sleeping went on for me and Steve. John slept like a baby every night, an enormous snoring baby. The very foundations of the hotel shook, or so it seemed, and after 3 nights of lying awake wishing we were sleeping next door to a major road repair project, which would have undoubtedly been a lot quieter, we said enough is enough and booted him out. What great friends we are. We booted him out. I think it was mainly me, wasn't it? You were alright because you were drunk as well. I was the only one who wasn't drinking because I was driving everywhere. Anyway, yeah, sent him off to down the corridor. So imagine then my surprise when the following night I was roused from my slumbers by more snoring, albeit a smidge quieter than the previous nights. So when it comes to snoring, this guy is an Olympic athlete. So, Xenia, I take my hat off to you.
While he was away, John and I kept in touch by telephone. We saw him occasionally on his frequent visits to Norwich, and it was during one of the occasional telephone calls that I asked the question I always ask, which is, have you found yourself a bit of totty yet?
You know what?
Young lady. To my immense surprise, John responded with a resounding yes. Exciting. I received a brief rundown of the person in question and was very surprised when I heard that she was a harpoonist. I was quite concerned that John, having finally met someone he might wish to marry, would have little opportunity to see her, as she would no doubt be spending a large amount of time on a whaling ship in the icy waters of the Arctic Ocean. Thankfully, it turned out that I'd misheard. As I'm sure you're all aware, she's not actually a harpoonist, as you know, she's a harpist. Okay. I'm afraid I don't know Xenia very...
You're doing well.
Xenia. Lasagna.
Bless you.
Yeah. Very well, and I've only met her on a handful of occasions, but I do know that she's a very talented lady. Only the other day she was playing her harp for the Duchess of Cornwall at a drinks reception in Epsom. She had also recently played for Princess Anne last year. And last year she played at Downing Street. Now, if I knew Xenia a bit better, I'd probably say something like, but it wasn't for long because they don't take kindly to buskers down there. I said it now, haven't I? I didn't know she'd laugh at that one. Anyway, not only is she a talented musician, but she's also a champion cocktail maker, it would seem. During her time in Cambridge, she worked in a bar serving newly invented cocktails, such as brain neutralizers. Any other names? Right, okay. Moving on. To the likes of Stephen Fry and Hugh Laurie and other Footlights luminaries.
And
Well,
we have other people here who are in the same bar who are my
Oh, really?
colleagues.
Ah, excellent, excellent. Those cocktail mates, look at that. The ones that are staggering about. Right. No doubt, after a few of Xenia's cocktails, John will be harpist as well. I'll explain that one later, Charlotte.
Naughty!
John and Xenia have recently discovered some remarkable coincidences that links their past. At the time that John was in HMV with Plymouth, Xenia was at Dartington College, only some 20 miles away, and John may well have served her, so to speak, when she popped in to buy albums, which she often did. And at about the same time, they were also both at the same Kid Creole and the Coconuts gig at the Cornwall Coliseum.
Who wasn't?
Stuart, there we go. Oh, you get mentioned there.
Stuart was there as well.
So, as it happens, was John's friend Stuart from Glossop, who's here today. There he is. And in July 2007, they were both at the Peter Gabriel concert at Blickling Hall. Mind you, Stiff nearly missed that one as a result of filling his newly acquired diesel car. Yes, with unleaded petrol. Fate, it would seem, was clearly determined to get them together.
They're a perfect match, and their mutual love of music was one of the first things that attracted them to each other. That and their shared love of art. Which is interesting because Stiff is certainly no oil painter. You hadn't heard that one before. Indeed, their first date was at an exhibition of sculptures at Chatsworth. I don't know exactly when that was, but I do know that John proposed to Xenia on the Rialto Bridge in Venice almost a year ago to the day. Xenia must feel safe in the knowledge, thank you, that John really, really loves her, as he has chosen to be here today rather than going to see Bob Dylan in Sheffield.
Not the only one.
He's playing tonight. Isn't that right, John?
Yes.
John, right. So what's Xenia got to look forward to? Well, all the rest of you, because this is the last paragraph. Well, apart from sleepless nights on account of John's story, she can look forward to a lifetime in the company of a person who will be a fantastic husband, companion and friend. He's generous, kind, considerate, caring. It says here. Does that bit say, John? Your typing's got a bit funny. No, I mean that seriously. He's witty, clever, entertaining, interesting, relaxed, and a whole host of other things that sadly a lot of other people aren't. I've also enjoyed John's company and always look forward to when he comes back to Norwich. And it's for that reason that we've always kept in touch and will continue to do so. And I'd really like to thank Xenia for giving him a reason to come back to Norfolk. I'm sure they will both enjoy a wonderful life together. It's taken John 51 years to get to this point, and I know that you will all agree that seeing John and Xenia getting married today, it was well worth the wait.